Agriculture on the move.
Agricole mouvement.
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 Hello again and welcome to the program Agriculture on the Move. I am Phillip Sydney. In today's program, we will be discussing the impact of the drought on the agricultural sector. Without further ado, because there's a lot to be discussed, my panelist today is Mr. Kemuel Jn Baptiste, to my extreme right, who is the Chief Extension Officer attached to the Ministry of Agriculture. Mrs. Farzana Leon, who is the officer in charge of the Water Resource Office in the Ministry of Sustainable Development, and Dr. Felix Jaria, who is the Director of Agricultural Services in the Ministry of Agriculture. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Leon, I want to start with you, because I think that's what the nucleus is, water, scarce resource. Give us a little overview of your office.
Our agency is the Water Resource Management Agency, and we are mandated to manage the water resources of the country. And when I say the water resources, I mean from the source, so our springs, our rivers, our groundwater. And as you are aware, we're discussing the impact of drought on agriculture today. And we're currently experiencing a drought. Right now, well, drought, first of all, let me explain that when we consider drought, we're thinking of extreme shortage of rainfall. And I know that the public may be seeing quite a bit of rain these days and thinking that perhaps we're no longer in a drought. Yes, it is the rainy season, but it's certainly not enough rain to bring us out of the drought as yet, not to date. So part of our duties include relaying information to the public to let them recognize the importance of water, and in such times as these, to urge the public to conserve water as best they can, harvest rainwater whenever there is rain, and basically to reduce the demand of potable water. And also, part of our duties as well is to issue abstraction licenses. So anyone that may be abstracting water from our rivers, from our springs, or groundwater for commercial purposes, they are required to apply to the Water Resource Management Agency in order to be issued an abstraction license. And this is really so that we can better be able to monitor what's going on with our resources. If we don't know someone is abstracting, then we're unable to do a balance. We currently monitor our flows in our rivers, and we need to be able to better understand that balance. If someone is abstracting upstream, we want to ensure that the downstream users are getting adequate amounts. So we need to have that balance. We also collect rainfall data. So these are a few of the functions of the Water Resource Management Agency.
Okay. Dr. Jaria, in light of what Ms. Leon said, if you are preparing for a drought, how, in terms of your planning, how do you plan your program with your department heads as far as tailoring that impact on agriculture?
That's a very, very good question. As you know, our normal, in St. Lucia, we have two seasons, the wet season and the dry season. And the wet season extends from about December to about May, and our dry season from May to about November. All right? So you have that period of your wet period where you kind of anticipate that between the months of May to about September that your dry spell between about December to about May, that's your dry spell. In preparing for your dry spell, you would put certain things into place. All right. The issues of proper drainage to conserve the water. So if you have proper contour drains, it can conserve the water. Instead of evacuating the water, these drains can keep the water for a longer period of time. There's also mulching, where you use organic matter around the base of the plants. And this does a number of things. It provides nutrients to the plants, but at the same time, it reduces the evapotranspiration. And so the microclimate around the plants are better suited for the development of crops. The other issue that we can consider are the proper selection of crops. You know, there are different microclimates in St. Lucia. Despite St. Lucia being a small island, you have a dry section in the north and in the south, like Beaufort and Cap Estate. These are the extreme areas. We have the rainy areas like Desglos, Fort Saint-Jacques. These are our higher rainfall areas. So based on the microclimate, you can plant to meet the particular weather condition you expect. But as we've noticed over the past few years, it's becoming more difficult to predict what the weather would be like. So as this year being a case in point, our dry season has extended past May, and we are now almost to the end
season,
of the beginning of the rainy season, the beginning of a hurricane season, and the rains haven't really come in any great volume. And so that presents a new challenge from the perspective that now our dry season is being extended, and so our wetter periods are a lot shorter. The ability of the soil to capture that rainfall that will fall and to provide moisture for a longer period during the dry season no longer obtains. So now we have to look at more inventive ways to address these issues, more water storage on the farms, whether it be through ponds or through plastic structures where we collect these waters and release them on a more gradual basis. The other issue we could look at is the fact that drip irrigation versus sprinkler irrigation. Farmers like to see the entire soil being wet through the use of sprinkler irrigation, but it's generally not the best because you have the plague, you use more water, you have the higher growth of weeds on your farm, and there's a potential for more pests and disease. Sprinkler drip irrigation is a more effective means of providing water and also nutrients to the crop because it provides the water at the base of the plant and in the right quantity. And so there's minimal loss of water with drip irrigation. So these are some of the interventions that one can take to address the issue as you prepare for a drought period.
Okay, well, it's up your alley now based on what Dr. Jaria just said. So it's actually challenging to you and your officers and the farmers. What are the real challenges that you face out there?
The challenge that we face is our responsibility as Extension is to get the information out to farmers in terms of the data that the water resources will collect that gives indication of anticipated drought. Now that we're in a drought situation, we're supposed to go out there and help the farmers to decide which is the best course of action in terms of dealing with the drought situation. One of the greatest challenges we face is the same that we face in terms of hurricane and other disasters. When a disaster is pronounced and it doesn't happen, for example, we announce a hurricane and it doesn't show up, persons next time around say, you know what, last time you guys were jokers, you said there was a hurricane and nothing happened, so the next time around you're not necessarily prepared. Like Farzana said a little earlier on, we are experiencing drought. A few persons are seeing a few, rain showers around the place, and you're like, you know what, you guys are not serious, it's raining. And so they go into this apathy where there's a lack of concern. And so our job now is to go in there to say to the farmers, look, you are anticipating so much in terms of volumes of production. What are your outputs now? There's an indication that your output has dropped in terms of productivity of your crops. You lost so much in terms of your anticipated income, and so we could use these experiences in terms of the losses that some farmers are experiencing to try and encourage other farmers to say, look, you do not have to wait till you have encountered that sort of loss in order to move forward and to take the adaptive measures. And so our job really is to introduce adaptive measures that are cost effective to the farmer, that they can actually afford in terms of water storage, in terms of, like Dr. Jaria said, appropriate irrigation methods. We do have persons who are adopting the practices, and what we're doing as Extension is using the success stories. Those farmers who have come away from sprinkler, for example, those farmers who have effectively used ferrous cement tanks or water storage facilities, to use them as the teachers, as the promoters of the sort of practices that we want to undertake in agricultural production.
We are due for a break. You're watching Agriculture on the Move. We will be right back. Stay tuned.
Agriculture, one of the pillars of St. Lucia's economic development, creating opportunities for earning a living for the farmer and his family. From the field to the kitchen, the St. Lucians are finding creative ways of using fruits, crops, and vegetables grown locally, from local seasonings to special brews, from aquaculture to the cultivation of local herbs for export. A strong agriculture industry strengthens the economy. The country needs your support, so buy local.
Welcome back to the program Agriculture on the Move. Ms. Leon, do you have a list of major rivers and streams on the island where you all monitor to know the stream flow, so that it can give the Minister of Agriculture an idea of where those farmers are farming and what they can do in terms of damming the water, and what are there any measures they should take in damming those streams for irrigation purposes?
Okay, let me answer the first question about the major rivers and streams in St. Lucia. Well, first of all, we have 37 watersheds in St. Lucia, so there are 37 main rivers in St. Lucia. There is a list of 10 major rivers, starting with Roseau, and it is based on water availability. Those 10 major rivers came about through a study that was done by Professor Frank Dale Morgan, and we currently use that study as our basis for carrying out stream flow measurements, because of our resources at the Water Resource Management Agency, we don't have enough personnel in order to carry out monitoring at all 37 rivers. So we focus on the 10 major watersheds. And we have flow data for every month, and if anyone requires that information, they can simply request it free of charge. We are ready to assist in disseminating that data. We have been monitoring, especially in light of the drought, and we've been noticing that there are certainly decreasing trends, as one would expect in a drought situation. And we're also even noticing that flows are even lower than in the 2010 drought. So it's an alarming situation, and in fact, currently investigations are being undertaken by our officers, the water resource officers, in order to look at various points of abstraction in specific watersheds, particularly Roseau, because Roseau, the last time it was recorded, I believe it was 40 liters per second at the lower end of the watershed. And this is after abstraction, this is after the dam, and after some abstraction due to farming. And that is particularly alarming because we've not seen these kind of flow rates before that we've recorded. So there are currently investigations being conducted, and we would need to address the abstraction at some points along the river. And we certainly recognize that there's a need for water for residential purposes, for agricultural purposes. There's food security that we need to consider. So it's not a clear-cut route that we would be taking. It would certainly be in consultation with farmers, in consultation with also our permanent secretary and our minister. We would certainly need to ensure that all essential needs are being met, but there's also the need of ecosystem services that we consider at the Water Resource Management Agency. So it's not an easy thing to manage the water resources, certainly not in times of drought. We need to be able to prioritize, and that priority list is something that we're working on at the moment. And so I would right now urge farmers that when they are looking to dam rivers, the best course of action, first of all, contact the Water Resource Management Agency, because as I was saying earlier, it's within the purview of the Water Resource Management Agency to issue abstraction licenses, and based on the law, anyone, including farmers that are abstracting water for commercial purposes, they need to apply for an abstraction license. It is in legislation, and from there we can advise persons. It's not just a matter of having to pay a fee. That's not what we're looking at specifically. What we're very concerned with more so is the demand for water and how the water is being used and what's being left downstream for other users. And when I say other users, I mean persons as well as fish. Yes, there are ecosystem services, aqua life. So what I would advise persons to do, first of all, contact the Water Resource Management Agency. In addition to that, whenever you're damming any area of the river, there needs to be downstream flow. You need to ensure that the water isn't staying within one area and not flowing over into the downstream. There needs to be continuous flow downstream.
But is there that kind of collaboration? I know, for example, years ago, your office was attached to the Ministry of Agriculture, so there was interaction. Now you all are separated. I mean, do you all come together because, okay, there is a drought? I mean, or is there constant consultation with Dr. Jaria in terms of ensuring what you're saying happens to the farm, it impacts on the farmer?
Certainly, we have been collaborating a lot more in recent times. And I think perhaps it's because we recognize that there was a drought pending. We expected that there would be disastrous conditions. So we have been collaborating a lot recently, I can tell you that. Certainly there's more need for collaboration, and especially with regard to actions on the ground, because it needs to be translated from discussion and making recommendations into action. So that's where I can certainly see more collaboration.
What do you say, Kemuel?
Yeah, the other thing too, in terms of collaboration, one of the reasons why there might have been the slight shift, it was challenging to have a facilitating agency within the same enforcing agency. When the water resources was at the Ministry of Agriculture. So here it is that extension officers and other persons are facilitating the farmer's business by providing technical support services, and at the same time, same agency is coming back to you and saying, look, you need to follow the rules and so on. So it was a kind of a strategic move to say, look, one agency is enforcing, the other agency is facilitating, but also to piggyback on what Farzana has been talking about. One of the things that we advise farmers to do is to store water.
That's right.
One of the challenges with abstraction and direct usage is that, for example, we had a problem one time in the Mabuya Valley where there are so many pumps on that river. Each individual farmer had his own pump at peak times of day, that there was no spillover. So the aquatic life downstream suffered. The whole ecosystem of the river suffered. And so what we are advising farmers to do is to store water. So at one particular time of the day, you do your abstraction, you store that water, and there are benefits to storing the water. Of course. You could filter it, then you could allow it to settle, and you could reduce your cost of filtration. Also the cost of particularly if the farmer is able to put it in a higher plane and feed it back by gravity. You save a lot of money on diesel, fuels, and so on. And so it is really encouraging if farmers are able to go out there, set up storage facilities, and there are so many options. We have zinc tanks, we have ferrocement tanks, we have the plastic, all kinds of storage facilities that a farmer could put on his holding and actually save money by doing so.
Dr. Jaria, what is it?
Yeah, just to piggyback on the discussion here, I think many times the collaboration is based on individuals more than on policy. So I think there's need for something like a memorandum of understanding between the Water Resources Management Agency and the Ministry of Agriculture, so that we ensure that the linkage obtains. As it presently obtains is somebody recognizes the needs. I've worked with Water Resources before because they were on the engineering department. So, and I have appreciation for water, so I've liaised with them. But it shouldn't be. It should be through a memorandum of understanding. There is that that linkage, and we take it from there and begin to do what is necessary to be done in a collaborative way. We have started to some measure. For example, we've been doing the AgroMed Bulletin with the Ministry of Agriculture, Water Resources Management Agency, and the Met Services. So we've started that initiative, but we need to go further. For example, on our field visits, probably the Water Resources Management Agency can accompany us, the field technicians, to do the assessments, and so they can make recommendations to us, so that while they may be policing us to some extent, but they will also be providing us the necessary support in terms of meeting a particular need. So I think that certainly there is need for collaborative development.
We are due for another break. You're watching Agriculture on the Move. We will be right back. Stay tuned.
There are many opportunities in agriculture, and broiler production is one such enterprise. For further information, contact the Veterinary and Livestock Division at 468-5621.
Welcome back to the program, Agriculture on the Move. Dr. Jaria, now that, okay, there is this collaboration, but you do think that you should take it a bit further in terms of maybe at your planning stage, your planning strategy stage, in terms of coming up with your program, your annual work program? How can, the Water Resource Management Authority fit into that?
Yeah, I think that's probably, that should be worked into the Memorandum of Understanding.
Okay.
And so it facilitates the opportunity for persons to make more tangible contributions towards the programming aspect of the annual programming of the ministry. And so if they're in, they can provide better guidance, so they know what we are doing, and it doesn't take them by surprise, and vice versa. And so they can provide more direct input in the development and the sustenance of the initiatives.
Kemuel, with our high food import bill, generally it's right now at $358 million. With the impact of the drought, I'm sure that will probably go out. But I'm still thinking, your office and your officers out there interfacing with the farmer, do you all think that there are certain micro areas that you can actually ensure, even within that drought period, to have farmers increase on the acreage to at least to meet that shortfall of some of the other farmers in the other areas that are being affected?
It's very interesting that you raised that particular issue, because just recently myself and some of the field staff were discussing, we have a few areas, and these are mostly in the highlands, where we have upland plateaus, where farmers are actually able, and it's very surprising, to appreciate it is to actually go there and see that at this time when we're experiencing drought, these guys are actually producing vegetables, cabbages, tomatoes, peppers without any irrigation. And maybe that's just one of their blessings. They're in an area where it's a microclimate. They get rainfall almost year round. And earlier we had a discussion. One of the strategies in terms of dealing with droughts is to identify these microclimates. So when drought circumstances arise, we could head into those areas and try and maintain production levels. Because the reverse is also true. In the rainy season, you could hardly produce certain of these vegetables in these very same areas.
That's correct.
And so it's one of the strategies that we are considering in terms of mapping out the areas, in terms of rainfall intensity and so on. And so when we are faced with these sort of droughts, we could go into those particular areas and maintain a certain level of production to sustain our food production. But having said that, we also can anticipate that there will be a lull or drop in vegetable production levels in the next few months. And that is a direct result of the reduced soil moisture and reduced water for irrigation. So we anticipate, and we're also seeing that in terms of the data that's been collected in terms of new vegetable fields. We have not seen much in terms of tomatoes, vegetables generally, or even plantains and the other crops. There's been a lull in the establishment, so we can anticipate that there will be less available for sale in the next few months until, of course, we get to the point where we could recover from that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Farzana, let me find out from you, in terms of, okay, yes, we will have droughts, yes, we will have disasters, etc. Areas that are supposed to be protected in terms of forest areas and watersheds, Do you see a degradation of those areas, or is there a need for reforestation to ensure that we protect those watersheds so that in case of a drought, at least we can ride through that period?
Now, yes, we have been collaborating with the Forestry Department on this as well. As you're aware, the Forestry Department works intensely on mapping the areas, the forested areas and so forth. And there has been a recognition that the forested areas are becoming more degraded. And unfortunately, we're seeing also that there's a lot more development taking place. I think that the public is very well aware of this. Especially in these hard economic times, I believe that what is happening is that persons are recognizing the value in the land and the views that they can have when they go into the upper watershed areas. And unfortunately, what's happening is that the land is being denuded and there's greater soil erosion. It's impacting our rivers. It's reducing the capacity of within the river, the water capacity. So it's unfortunate that it's happening. And I certainly think that efforts need to be taken in order to rehabilitate these areas. In fact, I know that there is a project coming on stream that the Forestry Department, liaising with other departments, they will be implementing soon. It's under DVRP, Disaster Vulnerability Reduction Project, implemented by the World Bank. And it's, facilitated by the World Bank, rather, and Government of St. Lucia implemented. And it's going to be focused on stabilization of riverbanks and reforesting of areas. So I don't have all the details of that project. Again, as I said, it's something that was put forward by the Forestry Department, but they will be collaborating with all the necessary agencies, for example, Water Resource Management Agency and the Ministry of Agriculture. But we are working towards it. We are working towards it, and there's certainly a need for it.
Dr. Jaria, that brings into focus our land use. Okay, in that collaborative effort with water resources, in terms of our land use, taking into consideration our watershed, how does that fit into your whole program?
Okay, that's quite an interesting perspective. As Farzana was talking, I kind of reflected on the banana industry and how over the years we gradually moved into the forests to increase our banana production. Over the past few years now, our bananas have decreased in terms of production, in terms of land being cultivated. And now might be the opportune time to go back into these lands and use it as an agroforestry kind of scenario. As Farzana said, now is hard economic times, and the microclimates that facilitate the growth of certain kinds of crops, for example, coffee and cocoa. Cocoa is a case in point where they grow better in the upper reaches of the catchment, and some of these agricultural lands that are left abandoned can be used now in an agroforestry kind of initiative, and I think that's where we could have a very good collaborative effort. I know there is a project soon to be starting, a cocoa project with Sustainable Development and Ministry of Agriculture. So here the synergies have begun to some extent. So, and there's also an FAO component of the Trust project where there'll be a river rehabilitation section. Again, there'll be a joint initiative between the Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry. So certainly, I guess everybody recognizes the need for working together. I guess as we put our heads together, we can begin to make some tangible way forward in our program.
Final word for yourself.
Yeah, along with that, we're also looking at doing alley cropping in those areas, because when we talked about the localized climatic areas, we also need to be very careful how we manage production of plantation crops in those particular areas. Finally, I would just like to say to our farmers that these are challenging times, and climate change cannot exactly be, it's not a predictable science, but if we prepare in terms of necessary preparations for drought, then we could handle it. And also in the case of rains and so on, we have other measures to deal with that. And
well, you have to leave it here, comrade. You run out of time already. half an hour, but it's quite short. Okay.
Yeah.
I want to thank you, Kemuel, as the Extension Officer,
Yes.
CEO for the Ministry of Agriculture. Thank you, Farzana, from the Water Resource Unit. Dr. Jaria, Director of Agricultural Services, thank you very much. And I hope to see you again soon.
Yes.
You're watching Agriculture on the Move. I would like to thank you, the viewers, for watching. I hope you got some information that is pertinent to you. Of course, the farmers out there. Thank you again. I am Phillip Sydney saying goodbye and see you again.
Agriculture on the move.
Agricole en mouvement.
Agriculture on the move.
Agricole en mouvement.
Agriculture on the move.
Agricole en mouvement.
Agriculture on the move.
Agricole en mouvement.